Hello again, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Real Talks. I'm your host, David Steele, and I'd like to welcome back a former guest and friend of the show, screenwriter Brad Rochefort. How are you, Brad?
Hey, David. Great to be here. How you doing?
Great. Before we begin, tell everybody where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, thanks. You can reach out to me on social media on Instagram at screenwriting.live, and you can find me on LinkedIn at Brad Rochefort. That's Rochefort. Look me up. I'm pretty much the Brad Rochefort that comes up on everything.
Fabulous. This is the first episode in a long-awaited show that I've been talking about for several weeks with you guys, and this is called Mob Mondays. This is where we'll be talking and analyzing and critiquing and dissecting each and every mob film. And it's going to span the course over several months. And we're going to be talking about some of the most iconic mob movies of all time, such as The Godfather, which just turned 50 this year, the Brian De Palma movie, The Untouchables, another De Palma movie, Scarface, and of course, Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. But that's not the one we're going to be kicking off with today. Our first episode we're going to be talking about is one of the most iconic mob movies of all time, and the 2006 Best Picture winner, The Departed. So let me ask you, Brad, when was the first time that you saw The Departed?
I mean, I saw it when it came out. I've been a very big fan of The Departed ever since.
Yeah, it's Scorsese, and so I was doing a little background about the film today, and so it is directed by Goodfellas director Martin Scorsese, and so it was distributed by Warner Brothers, and Plan B was really the major production company. There were three others that went along with it. This I didn't know. It was actually one of the producers was Brad Pitt.
Yeah, he's the B in Plan B.
Yeah. So, I didn't know that.
Right,
So
yeah.
we're going to be doing a whole Brad Pitt podcast at the end of the month or the beginning of August in preparation for the new movie he's got coming out called Bullet Train. And there are whispers this may be his last one, so we'll see about that. Screenplay was done by William Monahan, who I actually had never heard of, but I looked it up. Body of Lies, which was pretty good. And what's the one thing that they have in common, Brad? Or can you think of it?
This. You told me this, so it's Leonardo DiCaprio.
Absolutely. Leo is the lead in both of these, so this is no surprise that he's the lead in this one as well. Directed by the incomparable Martin Scorsese, and he has an astonishing 9 Best Director nominations in his career. Would you put him on the, I know this is your screenwriter, but would you put him on the Mount Everest of directors, do you think?
What a
I know
great
that's
question.
tough.
It is. Tarantino has captured a generation's heart, and the Coen brothers are on everyone's list. Spielberg, I think, is the guy there at the top. If you go to different generations, there's Alfred Hitchcock, and I think there's room for Martin Scorsese. I think there is 40 years of film fans that think he's the tops.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the big four. I mean, I'll call him the big four. You had, Francis Ford Coppola, you had Lucas, you had Scorsese, and, I think he's right up there. And it's hard to believe out of 9, he only has 1. But let me just list this for you because this tells you the amazing career that he's had. So, as I said, he's been nominated for 9. In 1980 was Raging Bull. He lost to Robert Redford for Ordinary People. In 1988, he was nominated for The Last Temptation of Christ. He lost to Barry Levinson for Rain Man. Okay. In 1990, he was directed. He was nominated for Best Director, which, by the way, he wrote Goodfellas too. He lost to Kevin Costner for Dancing with Wolves. In 2012, he was nominated for Gangs of New York, and he lost to Roman Polanski for The Pianist. The next year, he comes back and does The Aviator, and he loses to Clint Eastwood for $1 Million Baby. So in 2006, he won. In 2012, he got nominated again for Hugo, and you're going to have to help me with the pronunciation in this one. The Artist, the director for The Artist, which was the last black and white picture actually before Schindler's List in '93 to win. Of course, in 2013, he does The Wolf of Wall Street, and he loses to the director of Gravity, which actually, I'm sure you know this, has the longest tracking shot in world record history.
Yeah,
I think it's like 8 minutes.
I was so captivated by that film. I completely forgot they didn't film that in space. I was in the theater going like, wow. And then I was like, wait a minute, they didn't go to space.
Yeah. The Irishman, just a few years ago, was nominated for Best Picture too. And then, of course, he lost to the director for Parasite, which actually ended up winning Best Picture. Yeah. So he could easily have 3 or 4 Oscars. It's just amazing.
Depending on the year he released those pictures, he could easily have a shelf of Best Picture statues.
I know. So this was only made for $90 million, which is hard to believe.
Yeah.
Was released in the first weekend of October in 2006, and it made only a meager $26.8 million. Yeah. Now, obviously, this is 2006, and I get that. Went on to gross $132.5 million domestic. It only made $291.5, Brad, total.
Yeah.
And that's incredible.
Yeah, I think, there's the rating. It's definitely a hard R. And a lot of the Netflix and television releases, they cut out some of the harder parts of the R rating that would have, limited some audiences. And also it's the number of screens. I think in the 2020s, they're putting out a lot of pictures on a lot more. Well, let me say that. The streamers have changed things, but there were a lot of years where films like this were getting on a lot of screens, where I think when this was released, I'd have to look at the numbers. I wonder that. I wonder how many screens they released that on.
And this brings up a great point with the streamers, because this is the age before Netflix, before Hulu, and everything else. And when it's only on through, that's like Thor. I just went to go see Thor on Wednesday. And by the way, I just put up the Thor spoiler cast today. So go see the picture first and then come back and listen to our review. So yeah, it's 4,200 theaters today. My guess is back then you're talking about 25, 28, maybe 3,000 theaters. Yeah. So this cast though was unbelievable.
Can you think
Leonardo
of a film?
DiCaprio.
Can you think of a film with a better cast?
No, not off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, who's got 3 Academy Awards, Mark Wahlberg, Martin Sheen,
Alec Baldwin,
Alec Baldwin, who plays the captain.
Vera Farmiga.
My goodness. Yeah, unbelievable cast. The only other cast that I can think of off the top of my head, maybe, is this new one called Amsterdam coming out. Mm-hmm. Maybe. Couple of, that's a huge cast too. But yeah, so David O. Russell is just, I'm can't wait to see that. John David Washington, Christian Bale, who is just, not to get off topic, but he only had about 15 minutes in Thor, but did he make the most of it? Wow. So, so the whole plot, basically, it starts with a voiceover from Jack Nicholson, Frank Costello, and he explains why he doesn't want to be a product of his environment, rather the other way around. Mm-hmm. And he believes that he has, you have to do whatever you have to do in order to survive. Even the opening shot of this movie, when he's walking in the building in the silhouette, mm-hmm. It's just like, my goodness. It's just every single. So let me ask you this question: What facets do you consider to be Best Picture? Like, does it have to encompass all of it, like the acting and the directing and the screenwriting, or is it one of those things where it's just a technical?
For me, when I think of something and I think it's going to be Best Picture, usually it has captured my interest and it has made me feel.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because there's different things. No. Some movies make me feel. I can watch a movie with a dog and I get the feels. I'm just like, oh, I feel. Like, there's movies that capture your heart, on Marley and Me. And then it doesn't capture my interest. Like in the moment, I'm feeling it, but then later on, I'm just like, hey, yeah, that was good. This had a movie feel. It felt like you watched something. You're just like, wow, that one grabbed me.
Yeah.
There's so much going on, so much plot, so much detail, so much action. The editing. I mean, like, let's talk about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it's just one of those things where, it actually ended up winning multiple Academy Awards, too.
Yeah.
I mean, not just Best Picture and not just Best Director, but yeah, it was just technical awards, too. So, we meet Colin at an early age in a convenience store, and that's how this whole thing starts. And Frank basically tells him if he wants to earn money on the side, come talk to him. So the montages here, there was only a few montages, but they weren't like how do I put it? Like a sports montage, like a training montage, if you will.
Yeah.
It was just more of a quick sequence. And I mean, obviously that's what a montage is in order to fast forward time, but they didn't feel like they were forced, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I thought that was important. So here's a little something. So at the graduation, Frank gives Colin a black box, and he opens it, but we never see what's inside. Now, when I saw this again, and I've seen this film before, but it kind of reminded me of the briefcase in Pulp Fiction.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, thanks, Frank. We never see what's inside the box. I mean, but it's one of those things where it's like, obviously you have to use your imagination. I think that's what he wanted. And then, so the first, and it was, I won't say rushed, it was a 2.5 hour film, but only 10 minutes in, we're getting our first shot of both of them going in, well, not one by one going into Queen's office.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, it was tight. That's the good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was tight. It wasn't rushed. The time was worth it, and it was used well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, even the good cop, bad cop routine.
Yeah. Right.
when they're talking about, one of the past, it's like, okay. And once again, the cross-cutting between the Colin introduction and the Billy introduction, it's marvelous.
Yeah. Yeah. You see Matt Damon leaves the frame, and you know that DiCaprio has not seen him, but there they are in the same context, and they make Matt Damon tall, and they make DiCaprio look small and scared. It's masterful.
Yeah, I mean, so what I thought was the name of the movie, The Departed, came from when Billy's mother died.
Yeah.
And the card was left on her casket, and he was the last. So you see everybody there, and then he's the last one, and then the card says, my regards for the departed, Frank Costello, and that's where we get The Departed. So he didn't actually wait until like 15 minutes left in the film to say, oh, so that's where the title came from. Usually, you want to have that somewhere in the first act, so you know what the title has, why the title is meaning. So that was impressive. The couple of the things I noticed, like even when they're talking, the captain came in to talk about the microprocessors at the briefing, and it was those two quick panning shots of how, and you saw one from one angle and one from the other, and they zoomed in to really talk about urgency. I thought that was that used masterfully too.
David, that's the exact shot I noticed. I just watched the film, like we both just watched it just before this on purpose, like we talked. That is the exact shot I noticed. It is Alec Baldwin, and they pivot the camera in a way that they don't use that shot in any other part of at least 20 minutes before or after. Scorsese intentionally gives you this like 45-degree like rounded turn of the camera, and it's like your head turns and your brain turns with it, and then you watch each character respond, and you're going, well, whose opinion am I taking here? It's you're seeing what I'm seeing. That to me was masterful.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where every single thing, and we're gushing about this movie as we're talking, but it deserves it because there's a reason why it won Best Picture of the Year. Every single thing about it, from the cinematography, which, by the way, I mean, can we talk? I mean, granted, I'm going to be a little biased here because I'm from Boston, but can we just talk about how Scorsese used the city as a whole other character in this film?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
From shots of the State House
Yeah.
to the, what it reminds me of, Brad? It reminds me of Heat.
Sure.
We were just talking about this off camera. And what Michael Mann did in that film was he used the city of Los Angeles as a third character. I mean, we obviously have, De Niro and Pacino, but he used the city as a character, and that's what Scorsese did here.
Yeah.
And whether it's the State House or it's the shot of the T going by or whatever it is, it's one of those things you go, wow, that's really cool. Because a lot of films, they don't do that.
Yeah. I found it was really interesting to see DiCaprio was low and Matt Damon was high. Damon was in these ritzy restaurants and DiCaprio was in these dirty old buildings, but they all felt natural to the city of Boston.
Yeah, and that's how it is.
Yeah.
I mean, there are certain portions of it where it's very upscale, and then there are portions to where it's not so good.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it, it's the rough spots.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so he was able to capture both sides of it, and I think that's, and I don't know who's nominated that year, and I don't have it in front of me, but I think Monahan could have won an Oscar for the writing of this.
I think he did. I think they won 4. I think they won Best Editing, Best Picture, Best Screenplay.
Okay, and best, and that makes it. And it just was like, he deserved it for what it was worth because, no, it was. Do you think? Let me ask you this: do you think that, and in most of Scorsese's films, whether it's a Wolf of Wall Street or Goodfellas or Casino or runs a gamut, do you think his profanity? And I understand he comes from a rough. I mean, so if you watch his masterclass. He grew up in New York, and that's where, all that. Do you think his language, his vulgarity, is a detractor for audiences in today, or have they just gotten used to it, do you think?
I'd like to think it's how people are talking in the world he's describing. I think that's the voice of the person. He's showing you as an artist. Here's what that guy sounds like. If it's the bullpen at the police office and there's not a bunch of civilians watching the police, or the back office of the mobster, they're using not the polite everyday language of church.
No, I agree with you, because I think that's, if you make it sound too sugar coated, people will see right through it. They'll go, that's not what a cop would say. They're going to do this, and they're going to do, or a mobster would say, they're going to do this and do that. And it's like, I've always thought that you have to speak in conversation, because this is not how you would talk in, regular. So why would you do it on screen? Right. So, so essentially, so they both graduate the academy, and one is, one of his Costello's rat, and the other one agrees to go undercover. And so the one link that they have in common here is, of course, the therapist. And so that is, so they essentially, one goes to see her, and the other, so they both go to see her. And then, of course, the way Matt Damon, meets her, the first shot. It's interesting, too, because we see a shot that, like, she's in the middle.
Yeah.
So when she walks into the middle of the elevator, she just presses the button, and that's it. And then Damon's standing next to her. Whereas, and all the guys and, all of the gentlemen around her were taller than her, which made her, a stronger character. Whereas if you take a look at a shot like Demi's Silence of the Lambs, where she's walking through the Quantico, and she steps in the elevator, she's this little tiny thing, and there were all these guys towering above, she ends up being the strongest person out of the bunch. But, just the juxtaposition there of height can make all the difference. And it was just a regular shot. It was a medium shot. So that's just fascinating. But, I think the other thing too is you couldn't fake the Boston accent. You just can't. I mean, even I'm talking to you now, and some people would say, I mean, I'd like to think that after all these years, I've lost it here in LA, but there are some people that say, yeah, it's pretty thick. But yeah, I mean, you could definitely, my point is this: if you had gotten actors from, let's say, Chicago, or, if they tried to act being from Boston, it would be one thing. But, when you have it set in Boston and you have a Matt Damon, it's fluid, right? And so I think that's important. So it's just, and so we see, so they meet, and then, so tell me what, I know I'm rambling on here. So give me some things that you enjoyed about the film.
What I enjoyed about the film is how intricate the plot is in the second half, and specifically in the last 40 minutes. I think had you just had a traditional mob story, and you would have had a police mole and a mob mole, and they clashed, and there was a climax of some kind of shootout, it would have been an okay movie. However, we get to this point where you think it might be over, and you start to see these layers. You see how Matt Damon is climbing 2 ladders at once. He's climbing the police ladder and the mob ladder, and he doesn't particularly care which ladder he climbs. He has no loyalty. It's not just that he's an informant. It's that neither world thinks much of him. You see the other police bristle at him. They think you're not really part of our culture. You're a rat in our world, right? But he's also not really a mob guy per se. He's not doing the dirty work. He doesn't really get any blood on his hands. And then you have this...
Except, well, not to cut you off, but except the scene where, oh no, I'm thinking of Leo's character when...
Exactly.
Talk about gratuity. When the scene in which I was going to refer to is when when Leo is... I was getting from Billy is in Queen and the Talking, and then they nearly show up and get caught. And, of course, he turns the corner, and just having the next shot of him falling and going splat, and you literally see blood on his hands, and you go,
exactly.
Oh, my God. So, you're right.
There's these layers where you start to see DiCaprio's character tells Jack Nicholson, the person you have to fear is the person who thinks he's you. And DiCaprio is saying, I could be you. I'm smart enough. I'm powerful. I'm charismatic. I could be you, but I don't want it. Matt Damon doesn't have all those characteristics, but he does want it. And they're foreshadowing that's who you have to watch out for. And so there are just so many exciting turns that are entirely in character, but it's not the story you were expecting. You didn't expect Matt Damon to shoot the Jack Nicholson character. That's not how I thought it was going to go the first time I watched it. It was a shock, right?
No. Yeah. It's just, I mean, hell, you didn't even think he was going to shoot his, so at the warehouse when everything goes down, so the elevator, so Billy's arresting Matt Damon's character, and then you open the elevator door, boom, and it's like, oh wow, okay, he just shot him, and then you see him laying there in the door, and then you see the other guy from the academy. He's like, did you really think this was the only person that he had in the inside? So, of course, so he gets untied and everything else. And then when he steps over him, Matt Damon, boom!
Yeah.
And then there's no loyalty there. So, it's just one of those things where it's such a quick hit here and there and everywhere that it's like, wow. I mean, even the last shot. So we see, where the guy's, Matt Damon's character comes home, he opens the door, and then of course the next shot you see is, Mark Wahlberg's character just standing there, ready to deliver the final blow, and he's like, really? Come on. And so he ends up shooting him. And then, of course, the last shot you see is Digman standing there, and he's like, really? And then, of course, the last shot you see is the rat running around right across the rail. It's like, how apropos is that?
Yeah.
And not only is it signifying that this guy was a rat, but you could also say that the guys, hypothetically, in the state house behind you were corrupt too.
I think that might be part of the message. It's just tremendous. There's so much foreshadowing. If you see the movie a few times, early on in the film, Dignam tells Costigan, he tells DiCaprio's character, I'm the best friend you have. Like, I'm the one who's really going to watch your back. And then at the end, you see him, he's got the surgical booties on, he's got the gun out, and you're like, wow. Like, he didn't need to follow through on that, but he had his back.
Yeah, no, it was just, there was no missteps in this, obviously. The one thing I would say is this, even back in the day, in the 90s with those flip phones, sending a text with being able to send a text, even if it's 7 letters, and you're having to go through A, B, C, D, E, no phones. And you're like, okay, you know how hard that is? And that's why they had the one little shot.
I think for a generation of kids that had a cell phone under the desk in class and had to text each other without the teacher looking, I think they could do that. I think all kinds of teenagers had their phone under the dinner table, texting their friend, bring the phone in 5 minutes, going, oh, my friend might call.
But yeah, that's the only. I mean, look, it could be done. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's super, super difficult. But I mean, the fact that they were both able to stay in character, and for as long as and by the way, once. You think when Queen's dead, you think, okay, that's the end of it. And then Damon's character is standing over the phone.
Yeah.
And he sits send. And of course, the other one picks it up and is like, okay, now we have the reveal. Not the reveal, but this is the first time there are 30 minutes left in the film. The third act, we're deep in the third act. And now we're going to find out what's going on. And as you made mention, it's a whole other story.
Yeah.
And it's like, and of course, the fact that Costello worked for the FBI. Mm-hmm. And so then the next thing you see is him on the roof saying, yeah, he recorded everything. And guess what? His lawyer went to me because he trusted me. And of course, that's the link. And then he sends, he goes to the office of the office. Her and be like, look, I need you to hang on to this.
Yeah,
until I say
so many great reveals. The Citizens envelope is such a joy.
Yes.
Such a joy.
He's like, that's not how you spell citizens. Yeah. And then, and then of course he looks at it. He's like, I got your money. He's like, I got to go after him now. I mean, the fact that it's amazing because any one of the pictures could have won Best Picture back then. And this was just, and it didn't, you know what? It didn't even seem like this was a sympathy Oscar, if you know what I mean, because he had been nominated. Yeah. This felt like this was, and the thing is, this is probably his 5th best film. Maybe.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, obviously, all film is subjective and everything else, but when push comes to shove, this is probably his 5th best film. I mean, I'm talking about Raging Bull. I'm talking about Goodfellas. I'm talking about Mean Streets. I'm talking about Gangs of New York. End of the Innocents. It's like, huh? Talk about a number of riches. Oh, yeah. Where do you start?
What a career. I mean, The Departed might be my favorite Scorsese picture. I just like so much about it. There's so much layering, so much symbolism, so much detail. What I've really enjoyed learning is that for all of the characters in The Departed who get shot or killed, do you know this? Maybe you know this. Do you know there's like a symbol?
No,
there
maybe
is a
not.
symbol
Probably not.
On screen for every character who will die. It's an X. If you watch the film again, when Jack Nicholson enters the picture at the start of the story, he walks by a shadow of an X. There's an X on the carpet where Matt Damon lives right before he dies. The camera angles down and you see an X in the carpet. There's an X when Queenan enters the building on Washington Street. There's an X.
Yes, that I did know. I did notice that.
When DiCaprio goes to the airport, the windows all have X's in them. Every character that gets shot or dies intentionally, I've seen Scorsese say this, every character stands in front of, near or beside or above an X to let you know that they're going to die. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's why he's doing like a masterclass, because he is just unbelievable in what he does and how he does it. And, you know, that's fine. He only sticks to certain films. But at the same time, my goodness, it's just everything he does. It's just... So I'm curious. I don't know off the top of my head. Do you know what the last one he's directed? Last feature film that he's directed was? I don't have the IMDb in front of me.
I do. So I'll tell you right here. I think it was the Killing Moon, Killers of the Flower Moon. But it says it's been postponed because of COVID. So that was what was slated, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Okay.
The Irishman in 2019.
I forgot about Taxi Driver, Brad.
Sure.
Yeah. I forgot about Taxi Driver. I mean, you could just do a whole thing just on Scorsese's, filmography. Yes,
that's slated for November.
Yeah.
Which is coming up. It's July. That's slated for November. That's not too far away.
And he's done, and that's the thing about Scorsese too. He can do television too. It's not just, everybody knows of him from his films, like The Departed and like A Goodfellas and like The Wolf, but he has done films too, or he has done television, and that's what makes him so versatile. And it's
what I like about The Departed is Scorsese, who often enough does gangster and mob movies, he has made the police a mob or a gang in this movie. He's given a couple of the people in the police force this power, this swagger. There's a whole bunch of people who are just being good cops, good agents, good detectives, good troopers, but he gives this Dignan character this bully presence amongst the other cops, right? He's not being a professional in the workforce. He's straight up bullying these people, farting at them, giving them the middle finger, punching them in the face. He does not care. And you've got all these layers. You've got Alec Baldwin, who has this sort of results over method attitude. They show him putting his face in a bowl of ice because he has a hangover. I read it. I
saw that.
That is to show that he had a hangover. So it's like these guys are drinking, they're punching each other in the face, they're using tactics that aren't, above board. They're lying to the public and saying, oh, this gangster was the police informant. It's like they are, from Scorsese's view in this story, a bit of their own gang or mob, as long as the results happen.
Yeah. I'm just looking back at some of these other ones that are like Kudon in 97, The Color of Money. They talk about an underrated film. Of course, Martin Scorsese, directed that. Paul Newman and Tom Cruise. I think that movie gets overlooked as, I've seen it, and I don't know if you have, but the thing is that everybody remembers 1986 from one movie.
Yeah.
Top Gun. And they remember Tom Cruise from Top Gun. But people don't remember that little film that he did with Paul Newman called The Color of Money. And by the way, that was supposed to be a follow-up to the Jackie Gleason movie, The Hustler. So, that was an amazing movie. Cape Fear with Robert De Niro.
It's hit.
Juliette Lewis.
Yeah.
Casino.
And you haven't even mentioned that he directed Nicolas Cage in Bringing Out the Dead, about an ambulance driver. He's just got layers and layers.
Yes.
Of layers. Shutter Island. Shutter Island was amazing, right?
Yeah. Yes. 2000. Hard to believe that was 12 years ago. I mean, he just pumps these things out. So let me ask you this: how much of this? So you're a screenwriter. Let's say that you are actually writing a screenwriter or a script for something. How often has this ever happened? Would a director sit down with you and say, "Okay, I want," and actually walk you through what they want?
Yeah,
do you understand?
I've had that.
Or is it one of those things where they just give you an outline and say, "Okay, I want John Smith to be this, and I want Jane Smith to be that." And by the way, if you want to go back and listen to the interview we did with Brad, he talks all about characters. So you can listen to that. But could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Please go back and listen to my episode of Real Talks with David Steele. I had a great time recording that earlier this year. In my experience, in my personal experience, I made a short film that I wrote and produced that I brought the scripts to the director. I was looking for a director on something I produced. So we had like a peer-to-peer conversation about like his vision. And then once he had a vision, he would just check in with me on like, are we seeing the same thing? I was also writing a script for a director where I brought him the idea and we would have meetings and he would do the same kind of thing in reverse. Like he would say, okay, here's what I like about the ideas you're presenting and here's where I would go and like, here's what I'm interested in. And then I would come back and check and say, okay, good feedback. Here's what I like about what you like. And we just sort of built back and forth on what he liked, what I liked, what he liked, what I liked.
I see. And I mean, that's as much as it is the screenwriter, okay, as much as it's you, even though you're in front of the computer doing it, they still, because I think most people will have the inclination, the idea that a director is, okay, action. This person takes this cue, this person takes that cue, they're on set, okay, action. And that's what they do. But that's not necessarily the case. Some of these other directors, they do like to write their own screenplays. And so when they come to you with an idea or vice versa, it's, this is what I'd like, or how do you think we could actually make this better? And so when you get something like The Departed, it's one of those collaborations that you go, okay, this is why it's so good. And this is why you see a lot of screenwriters work with the same directors. Yeah. Because they know what they want, just like actors. They know what they want. I mean, all you got to do is take a look at Robert De Niro. He's been in countless films with Martin Scorsese because he knows what he wants.
That roster of actors that keep coming back for the same reason. They all say there's just that creative, artistic relationship where each person understands, what they're looking for, and then they deliver. Like each person delivers on that.
So I mean, I'm just curious. Speaking of Tarantino, have you seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Yeah. Once. I want to see it again.
How did you... Yeah, I've only seen it once myself. I don't think that it's... So he rumored that he was only going to do 10 films. That was going to be his 9th. I'll be very curious. The one thing about QT is this, that he does very finite... He'll take years. He'll get a script and then just rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it until it's down to that end. And that's why he's won 2 Academy Awards for screenwriting. Because it's so good that, he changes and has changed a whole generation as far as how that's done. But as far as The Departed is just, I had so much fun watching this movie again. It's one of those movies that, I mean, I haven't seen it in years, but I loved it. It captivated me every single, it's because I'm sure you've seen films, you'll get up in the middle of it and you'll go to the kitchen and make a snack and come back and go to the restroom and come back. And because you've seen the movie. But this is one of those you just have to sit in front of it for 2.5 hours. And it's like,
there's so much passion.
Unfortunately, Yes, that's the
Right?
word.
You know, there's so much passion
right.
in all the characters. Each actor brings this genuine passion for the role that, like, Martin Sheen as Captain Queenan, he brings a quiet passion. He's got this like football coach at the end of his career. He's quiet, but he really, really wants them to succeed. And you've just got firecracker energy out of Mark Wahlberg as Dignam. And then you've got Alec Baldwin, who has this like braggadocio, bravado, big in your face energy of like, no matter how much you think you're the alpha, he walks in, shuts you up, pushes his arms aside, and says, "Like I'm the dog that's barking right now." They all bring marvelous energy.
Yeah.
Jack Nicholson.
And we're not even talking about Jack Nicholson.
Tremendous.
That just tells you this man's won 3 Academy Awards. 2 for Best Actor and 1 for Best Supporting Actress. His last one, I believe, was as good as it gets. And it's like, my God, this guy is he's in about 15 minutes or 20 minutes of the film. But my God, the passion he brings. And you could it's one of those things, you have 2 different crime bosses, right? You have that Marlon Brando's, quiet, reserved, and people respect him. And then you have that, I won't say bravado, but that authoritative figure of, Jack Nicholson that says, here's what I'm going to do. It's like the scene where he's like, I want to search you. He's like, fine. Or he resists at first, and then he slams his arm against
that's what was coming to
table.
mind for me. It's unhinged. It's unhinged.
Yes, that's the word I'm looking for, is unhinged. Yeah. And it's like, my God. But that's just unbelievable how, and to put it all together. It's just, oh man, the
script gives them so much to work with, but Jack brings so much that's not on the page that is marvelous to watch when they're sitting in the bar and DiCaprio's confronting Jack about whether or not, he's threatening him. And Jack has the pistol in his hands and he's just so loose with it. He just loosely waves the gun out and even points it towards himself as if to say, like, me? Yeah.
Is there something you want to tell me?
And then he points it at himself, like, which is just dangerous. And the calmness that he does all this, and then his energy just goes to the top, and his range of comical to angry is so authentic. It does not feel like he's putting on a horror costume. That feels like the actual person getting that passionate about it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. No, and now that I'm thinking about it, it's the great juxtaposition. What you were just talking about Queen and how he was quiet and reserved. You had to have somebody like a Digman to counterbalance and to counteract that. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the same firecracker, as you called it, and be like, okay, they're balancing themselves out. I mean, that's like the scene where, the 3 of them are underneath the bridge. And they're, they're having a meeting, and one of them says something to the other, and then, like, he has to step in and say, "Shut up!" Break it up. How am I not supposed to arrest you at this point? Get in the car, both of you. And he has to play the peacemaker.
You said it. It's just, good cop, bad cop.
It's one of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so well done because you've watched plenty of TV shows. And it's just like, oh, okay, this is just, but this is the actual authentic type of thing, and it just works so well. So look, the ending of it was, as we both, it's one of the best endings because of the twists. When you first watch it, anybody who hasn't seen The Departed, go out and watch it first of all. But moreover than that, the twists. And that's what gets you. One of the best twists I've ever seen, I mean, the 2 best twists probably are Empire Strikes Back, I should say, and The Usual Suspects.
Oh, yeah.
And so with Bryan Singer, and so with Saiso Kose, but this is a twist too that is like, whoa, it's visceral, it's quick, and you crescendo up to it. It's not like, it's just up there at 10 all the time. So at least my thing is, and these are the kind of movies we're going to bring to you every single week with analysis and being able to sit down and go shot by shot and do this. This is just one of those, it's just I thought we'd kick it off with this one because it's an amazing movie, and it's gonna, just turned a little over 15 years old. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
This was 2006.
You know what I noticed this time? Tell me
um,
if you've noticed this, okay? I just like you and I both said we're going to watch the movie today. We each did. I did, and I've seen this many, many times. Like I showed you here, I have I've got this DVD from my box set of the 20 film collection of best pictures from the best of Warner Brothers, which is great. Yeah, it's a great. I just noticed this today after many viewings. This is a story about birth and death and fathers. Okay. You have DiCaprio, whose father died a long time ago, right? You have Matt Damon in the very introduction. Jack Nicholson says, "You're the boy being raised by your grandparents." He says, "Yeah," right? Matt Damon tells Jack Nicholson, "You never had children," right? Jack Nicholson never had kids. Matt Damon never had a father. DiCaprio never had a father. And then Vera Farmiga gets pregnant, presumably with DiCaprio's baby. I think we're all thinking that, right? That's what we're thinking, because I read this, that Matt Damon was the one who introduced to Scorsese the idea that the Damon character had impotence. That wasn't in the script. So when Vera Farmiga says to him in the kitchen, she goes, "Hey, it happens to everybody." That was Matt Damon's idea, that the psychology of his character was so focused on his work and so power hungry but impotent in all these directions that would manifest in his physical relationship. So you see that it's almost certain that the baby is DiCaprio's, and that baby has no father now. And even when you didn't know who the father was, the last thing Matt Damon says to the Vera Farmiga character is, "What about the baby?" It's at the funeral for Costigan. She walks by and he says, "What about the baby?" And she just keeps walking. It's all these characters who are looking for a father-son relationship. You see Martin Sheen says his son is away. Right?
At Notre Dame, Patrick. His name is Patrick.
Everybody has a son or a father that's away, and the Martin Sheen character is a bit like a father character. You see the uncle of DiCaprio's character in the hospital, and he's like, "Look, you were never really there for me, so don't pretend like you're there for me now." It's all these people who are like orphaned from that relationship, and this is what manifests. And the only person who actually fathers a child is the DiCaprio. In The Departed, this is the only character who's giving life. Right? It's like Scorsese saying, in this harsh world of mistakes and judgment, all these characters die for what they do or the risks they take, but the only person he's rewarding with life is DiCaprio. I noticed that today, and I thought it was mind-blowing. I was like, it's true. Everyone dies, from Matt Damon to Queenan to DiCaprio to Jack Nicholson, but the only person who gets rewarded in death is DiCaprio with the legacy of the son.
Yeah. Even that, that's the scene too when at the final shootout, and the phones are ringing, and so Matt Damon turns the corner and says, "You're an FBI agent, really? You couldn't tell." And so he shoots him, and he's like, "Is this what this was about?
Yeah,
you wanted a son?
Yeah,
really?" And so, he goes to shoot, and then, of course, he shoots him like 3 times, but it's like, so it's one of those things where the only other thing I can think of off the top of my head of the juxtaposition is The Godfather.
Yeah.
The end of The Godfather, when he's being, christened, the christening of the godson, and then, it was masterful in the way he did it, and then you had Coppola go and actually have all of the 4 or 5 families, the head of the 5 families killed. And then, of course, that's the final scene in The Godfather, which we'll do in several weeks down the road. And so she comes in screaming, "You had him killed, you had him killed." And Kay walks in and says, "Is it true?" And he says, "Don't ask me about my business." And then she says, "Okay, this one time, I'm allowing you to ask me." "No, it's not true." And she leaves, and of course, as a good film should, you see somebody else walk in and kiss the thing of The Godfather, and the final shot, just the door closes, and it's like, but it's the same premise. You have the birth of the child, and you have the death of all of the 4 or 5 families. So it was just, when you're able to do it well, It's just, and that's why I said earlier, I really put him up there as one of the Mount Everests. And it's not about awards, because look, he should have won 4 or 5 Oscars. We both agree to that. It's about the content, how he's doing it, and what he's doing, and he doesn't slow down. So I can't wait to see what he has next. Everything. I mean, it's to the point now where everything he does, you know the name Martin Scorsese, and even if it's not as good, you still have all those other things to go. But yeah, so this was the premiere episode of Mob Mondays. I don't know what we're going to do next week. I have a feeling, but I don't know. So give us a good, besides The Godfather, because we've already, by the way, if you want to go back and listen to The Godfather turns 50, you can do that. That was one of the very first podcasts I did. Give us some other good mob movies that might be worth a suggestion that we could do next week. Or, you know.
I mean, Goodfellas is amazing, right?
Off the top of your head.
So fun.
I think we should, I think we're going to stay with, you know what? I think we're going to stay with Scorsese for a while. I think what we're going to do is go with Goodfellas, and then we're going to go with Casino, which, by the way, Sharon Stone ended up winning a Golden Globe for. And then a movie I have not seen, but I've heard outstanding things of, is Mean Streets is good. And so I'll definitely have to do that.
I might add to your list.
Okay, this has been a blast.
Before you close this out, I'm going to add Miller's Crossing.
Yeah, go for it.
A Coen Brothers movie from 1990. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. And if you don't know anything about it,
nice.
Don't
and you
look
know
into
what?
It, just watch it.
I won't. I will find it and I will watch it. Should I watch the trailer?
Don't watch the trailer. It's the Coen.
Okay, just go in blind. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And you know what? I actually, this is going to be blasphemy, but I haven't even seen Fargo. So I have to sit down and watch Fargo too. There are so many things, and that's the thing. There's so many great movies that we're going to be doing over the next course of several weeks. So, definitely. I think Goodfellas is going to be the next on the list. So tune in next week when Goodfellas, another Martin Scorsese movie, will be talked about. Unfortunately, we just lost Ray Liotta, but it was just his performance in that was unbelievable, and he really carried that movie. He really did. So, yeah. Okay. So, this has been a blast. I hope he can eventually come back and join us for maybe not next week, but another session down the road.
Yeah.
So, I'm David Steele, and he's Brad Rochefort, and you've been listening to Mob Mondays on Real Talks.